Welcome back to another episode of Sal and Pal's Go to the Movies. I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hey, everyone.
So today we're going to be talking about scary stories to tell in the dark. Just a fair warning, there's going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. A group of teens visit an abandoned mansion during Halloween. One of the teens, Stella, finds a book that has scary stories written in it and takes it with her. Soon they find that new stories begin to be written in the book with them as characters in them. Now they have to find out how to stop this before they all disappear. Okay, so let's run down the cast really quick. First we have Zoe Margaret Coletti, who plays Stella. We have Michael Garza, who plays Ramon Morales. We got Gabriel Rush, who plays Augie. We have Dean Norris, who plays Roy, or Stella's father. We have Austin Segur, who plays Chuck. We have Natalie Ganshorn, who plays Ruth. We have Austin Abrams, who plays Tommy. We have Kathleen Pollard, who plays Sarah Bellows. We have Gail Bellows, who plays Chief Turner. And we have director Andrew Overdahl. And we have the screenplay written by Guillermo del Toro. I actually never read the books, but I was aware of them when I was growing up. I was more into Goosebumps, to tell you the truth. But I did know some of these stories, and I did recognize them when I saw them in the movie. We actually saw Harold, the Big Toe, the Haunted House, the Red Spot, the Dream, just to name a few in the movie. And actually, I want to point this out that I really enjoyed how Stella was portrayed as a fan of horror movies, mostly like a Universal monster fan. And we did see that she had poster of the werewolf, and she also had a lot of posters of Bela Lugosi, as well as other scary movies around her room. That's one of the things that I really enjoyed about the movie. They just discreetly put that in there for fans who are fans of this kind of genre. Back to the review. So unlike other scary book stories that have been adapted to movies, this one takes a new route of including more stories into one movie. It hits both points, good and bad. Good because you know and you read the books before, and now that you're watching the movie, you get excited knowing what's coming and you're aware of these stories beforehand. But it could also be a bad point, because I am sure that if they had more time, they could actually allocate more time to each of the stories they portrayed on the big screen, and that could have made it more impactful to fans who actually went to go see this movie. The thing that I mostly enjoyed about this movie was the scenes and how they created the atmosphere when every story was about to happen. I liked the camera work. I liked how they framed the stories and how they framed each shot, how they laid out the whole scene beforehand, and especially some of the color schemes that related to every story. It had like a different color palette in a sense, so you knew when they were getting into a story. For example, the Red Spot, it was more of a pink tone. The Dream was a real dark red color, and other stories had their own little color associated with their story. One thing that I actually did not like was the lack of character development. It actually hurt the movie overall. We did not get invested in the characters to care too much about them once they were in trouble or they went missing. Also, the lack of backstory about Stella and her dad and her mom, that's a big question mark in my book, because I want to know what happened there. I wanted to know more. Did she disappear due to Sarah Bellows, or did she just give up on her family and just walk away? It was never cleared up. It was alluded to, but it never came back to give us the answer. Also, I think if they would have used 3 stories at most and linked them together, it would have made a better, concise film instead of having more than 3 stories and not fully closing each one up. So to me, it felt like they started a story and they abruptly just finished it and they continued, and the characters were not really developed. So I wasn't really feeling the characters, as other movies. So that's enough on my part. I'm going to pass it on to Touly and see how he saw this movie.
So for me, I grew up reading the books. Granted, it has been a long time since I read it, so my memory of what specifically happened in each of the tale is kind of a blur, but each time one of these tales were brought forth in the movie, my memory sort of was kind of like jotting, oh yeah, this was the theme of this story, or this was what I was expecting to happen. So I would say that was the most fascinating and thing that I enjoyed most about the film was just seeing which tales from the book were going to get incorporated into the movie. And when they popped up, it's like, oh, okay, they're going to do this one now. It kind of spoiled it in a way. Like, instead of it happening naturally where a character just runs into into the situation without the title being showcased in the book and being rented in front of us. That could have been a way that they could have handled it as well, so that it was maybe a little unpredictable, but predictable at the same time if they had set up the moment. I mean, some of these characters, they did get sort of foreshadowing that would have led up to what happened, or when whatever's transpired, they sort of gave a little history as to why whatever's going to come after them relates to their real life situation. The one character who I feel I was most invested in, despite the lack of character development, as Sal pointed out, and that I agree with, but at least the payoff sort of was there, was with the character Chuck, who was one of Stella's friends. And the setup already was there at the beginning when they entered the haunted house, and he was hiding from Augie because he was trying to spook the guy, and he hid in his cabinet, and he opened the cabinet, he was in this red room with this old lady and this dog staring back at him. And throughout parts of the film, he kept on bringing up the idea of, him having this dream or this vision of this old lady again. And of course, initially, particularly Augie, he didn't believe him. It's like, oh, you know what you saw is not there. I don't know what you're talking about. And eventually came to fruition later in the gang when Stella, Ramon, and Chuck were trying to dig up information at this hospital for what happened to Sarah Bellum. And Chuck was reluctant to go to this room, which was coincidentally called the Red Room because he associated with what he saw earlier in that haunted house. Because of that, he separated himself from the group and went his own way to avoid getting caught by the people running the facility. Initially, they fooled me with the setup because he got into an elevator, and I was thinking when the elevator opened up, he would have been back into that red room, and then he would have to deal with the consequences of that. But instead, they played to our expectations in a way, and they led the character throughout the facility, trying to avoid getting caught by the people running the place. And eventually, the security alarm goes off, and the hallways starts flashing red because we normally associate like a security alarm with the color red. And then that's when the thing kicks in, where it's like, okay, now he's not necessarily in a red room, but he's in a scenario where, yes, it is red, and then lo and behold, there's the old lady in front of him down the hallway. And to me, this was the most intense part of the film, where, he kept on going down a different path, but the old lady just kept on getting closer and closer. Like, it was just Chuck running to this lady over and over. It was like unavoidable. It was just one of those moments where, he couldn't escape. He was gone. You could see the hopelessness, the fear that was going through him. And like I said, in terms of all the characters that were in this film, that was the setup that I felt that had the most satisfying payoff. Sal did mention an interesting point about Stella's character, in that she's really into this horror genre kind of thing. They even showcased Night of the Living Dead, that was released in 1960, which I think coincidentally was the year that this film was taking place as well. Yeah, they showed Night of the Living Dead at the movie theater, and that's where they met Ramon for the first time. Despite the interest that Stella is into, in this case, horror-related stuff, it sort of kind of went against her character or her decision-making as well. I would have overlooked this had Stella been a character who I wanted to root for, just like the other characters as well. And I say this because some of the decisions that she made, either for herself or for the group, didn't quite make sense with the sort of expectation I had on her, based on the expectations I had on her, because she is into horror related stuff, right? For instance, there was this moment where one of the guys wanted to go to the police to tell them what was going on, but their decision, or in this case Stella was speaking for the gang, why they shouldn't go there is because A, the police wouldn't believe them in the first place, and B, if they did believe them, it would have been too late. Each of their tales would have got to them first, and it would not have mattered. And then of course Ramon pitched in the idea, and if we do go to the police, then they would tie me to what happened to Tommy earlier. But at this point, I'm thinking to myself, well, you guys seem pretty desperate, and it's kind of like a hopeless cause in what you're trying to do right now. It doesn't seem like you guys are going to be able to avoid the situation. Might as well let an adult know, at the very least. And then whatever plays out from there. Again, Stella and her interest in horror flick, the knowledge that she should just have just from watching this. Again, I might be stretching this in a bit, but at the same time, when the character, again, wasn't somebody who I was trying to root for, I start picking at these other aspects of the character, because, she should have known better. Like, for example, why grab the book? Was he so fanatical of this genre that she just forgot about it and just grabbed it on instinct? Or decisions like, why separate the group? Why not just stick together or something? If something bad happens to all of them, so be it, but at least they're there to protect one another in a sense. Kind of like what happened to Ruth. The reason why Ruth was quote unquote saved, despite what the chief said about her potentially being in a psychiatric facility for the rest of her life because she was so traumatized by what happened to her. The fact that the gang got to her while her tale was being told, it kind of quote unquote saved her. So what if they just stuck together? How would that have played out? Again, it just goes back to the whole Stella's character where I'm like, well, she should have known better given her interest in horror related stuff. But at the same time, I might be stretching it, but that's how I felt when I was watching the film. And also to adults in this film, particularly Stella's father and the chief. I know there was a disconnect between Stella's dad and herself because of what happened to Stella's mom, but at some point I felt like the father should have been a father and just be protective of the daughter. Like, oh, that night when they were at the police station and Stella ended up calling her dad, that's when they had that heart-to-heart talk about what happened to their mother and why they felt so disconnected from the other. I felt like the father should have done whatever he could to have gone searching for Stella, but instead they just left it like that. It's like, okay, so it seems like the father is not going to be an important figure in this film, so that we know that Stella is not alone in terms of not having a parent to guide her in a sense. And then the chief, okay, again, if you're the chief of police, I expect you to be able to handle certain situations with certain confidence. And then when that creature, which I don't recall being in the original tales, I could be wrong, but when all those different body parts were coming together and he was just standing in front of it while this was happening and then instantly gets killed after the fact, I was thinking to myself, well, if you're the chief police, when an emergency hits the fence or whatever, how would you react? Aren't you supposed to be a person who knows what to do in these sort of situations? And yes, this is an abnormal thing that's happening in front of him, but I didn't expect him to just stand there, like run or let the kids out or whatever, do something, but he was just standing there. So again, with the lack of character development and the much lack of investment I had in these characters, this is when I start questioning even deeper why these characters are doing what they do or what they are not doing. The camera shots, overall, they were fine, but there were a couple that I didn't quite like in terms of the transitions, like either from one scene to another, there was a missing shot where it didn't allow me to sort of acknowledge that the kids were heading in this direction. It was kind of like, oh, they're already there doing whatever it is that they're doing. Or in the same scene where from moment to moment, one shot it did not linger long enough. It was like a quick moment transition that it was like one of those, it felt like a knee jerking sort of shift in the shots. Like in 1 second, I'm looking at Stella. Oh, and now I'm looking at Ramon. The moment needed to have lingered one of those characters before it moved on to the other. So I did have a complaint about a couple of the camera shots in the film though. I would say the complaint that I had the most, because in general, it kind of affected the entirety of the film, was the sort of audience that this film was maybe intended for. It is PG-13. They didn't have a lot of room to work with in terms of how dark they wanted to make the film. They were playing on this fence where, okay, sometimes we'll be very goosebumpy in terms of the mood, and other times, and these are the times when each of the characters are experiencing their own tales or whatever, this is when you get into the serious stuff. If I had to choose, I'd rather them be, at this point, in the middle. Don't be too goosebumpy, but at the same time, don't be too extreme. Just be in the middle and be steady throughout the film. But they kept on flip-flopping back and forth, and because of this, I felt like the writing kind of suffered as well, because then in those less serious situations, even after when something bad is happening, like when one of the kids, when one of them experienced their tale and they disappeared, it felt like Stella and Ramon, they're still like joking about, they're not joking about the situation, but they felt like they were still in this carefree scenario. Instead of treating the situation as being hopeless or just their morale being down, which I felt it should have been, given what happened. It seemed like, oh, in this scene now, they're okay. They're not too worried, despite them trying to investigate what happened to Sarah. Again, I got that kind of vibe. And again, it's kind of flip-flopping between the sort of mood. Overall, that affected the entirety of the film. I wish, like I said, it would have just been straight down the middle and consistent. But overall, though, I would say I enjoyed the film because I did read the books, and it did bring back some nostalgic factor, but in terms of execution of, character development and the tone of the film, definitely could have been better, especially with this film where Guillermo del Toro is involved with, because he has contributed to other films that I really liked. Perhaps that's why they brought him aboard for this project. Maybe they felt like he could have been able to create something that could have checked all the marks, but in the end, it didn't quite check all the marks.
I totally agree with you, the way they were trying to please two types of audience. Also, I agree that they had Guillermo on board, and we attribute Guillermo to a lot of creature fantasy and monsters, for example, Pan's Labyrinth and Hellboy. So with that, I think he was on board to do the screenplay, but at the same time dictate how the monsters will look. But I criticize how they achieved this. Maybe they asked for his input on it and then they gave it to the writers, and the writers were the ones who were trying to please both audience. But I think someone in there should have said, hey, stop, we need to figure this out, and if Guillermo didn't do that, then it's on Guillermo, because I'm like, he's one of the persons who knows how to direct, produce, and write stories. So in that sense, I'm like, for him to just, like, the monsters were good and everything, I enjoyed them, especially the pale woman, but other than that, like you said, the character development wasn't there, and that's a very important part of the stories to get us captivated. And then also when they flip-flop with audience, I didn't enjoy that either. So now, if I was involved in this project, what I would do, I would actually have made this into a Netflix series. One episode allocated to each story, and Stella has to go around and stop the stories from happening, as he did for Ruth and saved her, in a sense. 3 seasons, 1 season for each book, and there's 3 books, 1 episode for every story, and at the same time the stories have to link somehow together, and this gives more time for them to develop the characters alongside with their backstories. So that's how I would handle this. I don't think I would enjoy that it was a movie and had all these stories inputted into it. It was just too much seasoning in one bowl. So it's like I couldn't really enjoy it. I enjoyed parts of it, but then there was more things that I didn't enjoy about the movie than I enjoyed. So with that, I'm going to ask Touly for his final grade of the movie.
I do agree with Sal that I most likely would have enjoyed this more had this been a TV series rather than a film. Would have given more time for each of the characters in which each of these tales were about, to see who these characters were, how they became these characters, and what happened to them after the fact. Even things that happened to Stella, for instance, how she seemed very isolated and being made fun of because of what happened to her and her mom. Instead of being on the wordy side and having a character tell us, hey, this is what happened to her, and we're supposed to just take it at face value, they could have taken some of that time to just showcase her being isolated and how she became who she was, or, just something, rather than just tell me, show me. And I think when it comes to character development and believability, less on the wordy side and just showing us what happened to them, in my case, it's the better formula of making us invested in the character. So again, given that this is a movie time frame, they have to kind of speed it up perhaps, and because of that, they had to go the description route in terms of a character telling us what happened rather than showing us what happened. Overall, I'm going to give this film, I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. And I say that because I probably would give this film around a 5.5 to a 6. But like I said, I did grow up reading the books, and when I saw some of these tales kind of unfold on me, that gave it that additional value to my experience, so I bumped it to a 6.5. I would still say I recommend this film for people who did read the books to go watch it, because I imagine at least half the people in the room who I was watching this film with, they were adults, and I'm pretty confident that they grew up reading the books as well. So at the very least, go watch it for the nostalgic trip. Otherwise, if you're looking for like a good horror flick to watch, there are definitely better ones out there. Not to say this film was just like overall bad, but given the expectations that I had for the film, from the trailer, and thinking that it was going to be just dark, it wasn't quite there. So it was an okay film. That's how I would put it.
So for me, I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10. The reason is because, unlike Touly, I did not read the books. Like I said, I was more of a Goosebumps fan. The reason I was going to give it a lower grade, but I bumped it up a little more, was Guillermo del Toro, because I really think that he was in charge of the creatures, how he dictated how they were going to be represented. Each one of the creatures in the movie had its own little thing, especially Harold, the Scarecrow, to the Pale Woman. So all these had different elements, and it came from the book. So I think fans who actually read the books would appreciate how they portrayed the characters. It wasn't too far from what they read and envisioned when they were young. But at the same time, I do minus a point or so because of the writers. The story was not well. I mean, it's still workable with, and I believe that it's still salvageable in a way, but not as a movie, but as a series. I guess that does it for this review of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Please join us next time when we're going to review Ready or Not.
If we don't find her and perform the ritual, we're all dead.
Found her.
God damn it, Emily!
I don't know what I'm doing!
Click like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, keep watching movies.